You would have gotten an email from Dylan Foley probably this morning. 1 second, I think I can, I'll just send you this. 1 second. All right, that's why we do this. Give me 1 second. I just sent it to you. I'm sending it now. What is happening? No, it's okay. I just sent it to you. She's one of the co-owners of Juno Search Partners. You got it? You mean like I'm doing right now? Goodbye.
Come on, Shelly, that'd be funny. I could give the talk and then you and I on the side are talking about other things or how it would just be a funny scene. Can you see me? Hello, hello. Hello again, Vicky. Shelly. When I logged in, it had me as Shelly Azen. I'll be curious if I know any of the folks on the call.
Well, yeah, I hope so.
Evan and Shelly, I just looked it up, and it's called A Most Beautiful Thing.
A Most Beautiful Thing.
And it is available on Peacock and Amazon.
Oh, perfect.
On Amazon Prime?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good.
Yes.
I'll watch it tonight.
You can download it.
Oh, you know what? My dad would love that too. I'm actually going home Friday, Vicky. My dad would love to watch that. We'll watch it this weekend, maybe.
It's a really great.
Yeah, he likes sports-related movies a lot.
Has he watched the documentary for The Boys in the Boat?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good one. I'll have to ask that.
Not the book, but the actual documentary.
All right, I'm going to write these down.
The book. I tried to read that book, but I just couldn't get into it.
Well, there's a lot of technical language in there that you would not understand if you're not a rower.
Yeah.
I find it a little, but there's a lot of history in it too, Shell.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, I'm writing this down. That's 2 I can have him watch this weekend in between football.
It's really good.
Okay, good. Thank you.
There's a lot of stuff about the war and what was going on in history at that moment in time. It's very fascinating.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just took a walk around Cooper River yesterday. I'm assuming your daughter's rode there over in.
Many times.
I actually took about 4 or 5 rowing lessons from the coach of Rutgers women's team because I like rowing in the gym. I like doing exercises. It's like your whole body, Yeah. And I just couldn't believe how hard it was.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of coordination involved.
Oh my God.
There is definitely technique.
Oh my God. You just get that paddle a little bit off. And I'm like, at first he had me on a tether and he'd let me row out and pull me back in. And then he was like, okay, you're ready. I'm like, no, don't let me go.
Oh, that's great.
It's not as easy as it looks.
No, and the timing of your body, to coordinate, it's.
And then you've got to time it with everybody else in the boat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did your daughter get into rowing, of all things?
So we have very good friends who were rowers, and we used to joke. My daughter was a dancer, and then they joked around that their daughter and our daughter would be really great lightweight rowers, and we should
Oh,
like throw them in. And so there was a learn to row it down in Conshohocken one spring, and we put her in a boat, and she got immediately hooked
wow.
and took a real natural. I don't know. She just took to it really fast and loved it and loved the team aspect of it versus
Yeah,
dance. Like she
sure.
liked having like a team around her
Yeah.
and never looked back.
It's a very unusual sport. I don't think of anything that's like that, like as a team, individual, locked into a thing. I mean, it's a really,
I think it's really great. I'm a huge fan and I love watching it. I miss watching her compete right now. So I'm very anxious for them to get back.
where did she go to high school? Did they have a team?
Harriton High School. She
Oh,
did.
okay.
Their team was okay. And then it's a long, complicated story. She moved to working with her club team and stuff because it was just a little more competitive. And
Right.
so, but yes.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. We always wait a few minutes just for those wrapping up other calls and maybe getting a beverage of choice to get ready for a very exciting hour of HR at Home. Hello, Deb Kaufman. It's great to see some new names and faces. So welcome, everybody. If you're new, we'll just be starting in just a minute. If you're a returning guest, it's great to see everyone. Our last HR at Home of the year. I can't believe it. It's been 16 sessions.
Wow, is it really?
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Boy.
Let's see. We'll just give another minute here. It's only 4:02.
Shelley, I'm curious, do you typically just leave it unmuted and people can just join in as they want? Good.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, and then we also monitor the chat feature so people can chat if they
Okay.
want, and I'll call it out. I'll interrupt you to call it out.
Good, please.
Yeah.
Now, here's my buddy, the fanatic, is with me. Keeps me
folks-
sane.
A few folks are dialing in, so as soon as they come on, we'll get started.
Hey, Deb Kaufman.
Deb, you're so popular with everybody.
Well, what can I say? Absence makes the heart grow fonder.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. Very true. All right. Well, let's get started. It's almost 5 minutes after. Welcome everyone to HR at Home number 16. It's our last one of 2020. Who would have thought when we just cooked up this idea, I think over email one day back in March, that we'd still be here talking about being home and working from home in the pandemic. But I don't know about the rest of you. It's certainly been great to have the continuity of seeing your faces on a regular basis, which is really what we wanted to do, was to be able to stay connected and, you know, share some best practices and some resources with each other. So thanks for being along for the ride. In typical fashion, our objectives for today are just, as I said, to stay connected. Keith's going to give us some legal updates. Literally at like 2:30, Keith emailed me and said, oh my God, the EEOC just came down with the ruling. Can I please change my slide for today? So this is literally hot off the presses as of about 90 minutes ago. And then I'll introduce our guest speaker to you, DillonMarcus, when Keith is finished, and then we'll have a really nice discussion. And as usual, cocktails are optional. I mean, it is the holiday season, so feel free. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Keith.
Great, thanks, Shelley. It's good to have some pull because I was kind of looking for something to talk about today. So I called the EEOC and I said, hey, can you guys come out with something? I need material. And sure enough, they were right on it. Yeah, I wish, right? But seriously, timing is everything. As Shelley said, just this afternoon, the EEOC came out with some long-awaited guidance on vaccine requirements. You know, we've been talking for weeks now about, can an employer require employees to take vaccines or to have vaccines administered as a condition of coming back to the workplace? And most of us thought yes. We didn't have any guidance formally. We didn't have any federal legislation on it, but we were looking at it the way we would look at the flu vaccine or the H1N1 vaccine and try to apply those principles. So today, The EEOC helped us out a little bit, and they basically confirmed that. They said a couple things, and I just wanted to pick out a few of the highlights. First, the vaccine does not constitute a medical examination under the ADA. So it doesn't count as an unlawful medical examination just to require someone to take the vaccine. But if you have pre-vaccination screening questions, those would be disability related inquiries. So it's important to understand a couple things. As most of you know, if you've been watching the news, if you take the vaccine, typically you're required to go through a battery of pre-vaccine questions to make sure you're suitable for it. If the employer is administering the vaccine and asking those questions, or contracting with a third party to do that and getting that information, that would be probably unlawful unless it's a job-related business necessity. Two ways to get around that. Number one, if it's voluntary, if taking the vaccine is voluntary, and therefore the questions are truly voluntary. And number two, and probably the most common or the best resolution, is to contract with a pharmacy or some third-party provider where you as the employer will not be getting any of the information about the employee. All of those pre-screening questions will be asked by that third-party contractor and will not come back to you in any way. If you do that, you're going to be okay. So the vaccine doesn't constitute an examination. Make sure that if you ask questions, you're keeping a wall between you and those questions. The second point, asking or requiring an employee to show proof of receipt of the vaccination is not to be considered a disability-related inquiry. As you know, you're not allowed to ask questions that would lead to information about whether or not an employee has a disability. The EEOC is telling us that simply saying, prove to us that you've had the vaccine, is not one of those questions. But, and there's always a but, follow-up questions could be. So I say, Shelley, did you get the vaccine? Show me proof. And she says, no, I didn't. Well, why not? How come you didn't get it? What were the reasons?
Right.
Now you're getting into disability-related questions that are unlawful. So be really careful there. Simply requiring it or asking for proof is okay. Pushing on with additional questions could be potentially problems. And just like with the flu shots, we've got to be aware of potential exemptions that the employee could cite for not getting a vaccine. And the two that we think of most commonly are the Americans with Disabilities Act, that they have some kind of health condition or disability which prohibits them from getting the shot, or religious basis, objecting based on some sincerely held religious belief, practice, or observance. So in those situations, we need to consider, if it's an ADA issue, does it constitute a direct threat if the employee comes to work without the vaccination? And we need to do an individualized assessment. We can't just make a blanket across the board. Deb Kaufman's not getting it, so she's a direct threat. Sorry, Deb, figured I'd pick on you again. So we need to do an individualized assessment. What's the duration, the projected duration of the condition? What's the severity or nature of it? What's the likelihood of harm? What's the imminence of harm? We need to do that for every employee before we make a decision as to whether that constitutes a direct threat. And then we also need to then look at, can there be a reasonable accommodation that we can make? And if it creates an undue hardship under either the ADA or religion, we can potentially exclude them from the workplace. And the last point, before I turn it over to Evan, is that the standard for an undue hardship is different under the ADA requirement and the Title VII requirement. Under the ADA, it has to be a significant difficulty or expense for the employer in order to be an undue hardship. Significant difficulty or expense. Under Title VII, it has to be more than a de minimis cost. That's a much lower standard. Just more than, a de minimis cost is minimal cost to the employer. We're obviously going to look at the specifics of that employer, how much money they make, what's the cost relative to them. But if it's more than a de minimis cost, that could be considered an undue hardship under Title VII. Has to be a significant disability or difficulty or expense under the ADA. So that's, as Shelley said, hot off the presses today. It's contained in the EEOC guidance if you want to check all the questions. It's just a compilation and add on to the Q&As that they've been putting out since March. This is section K of that, which is the vaccine section. And hopefully that helps answer a few of the questions we've had.
Yeah, it's good timing too. It's interesting. I was just talking to a client yesterday who said if they think about bringing folks back to work, she wants them all to be vaccinated. And I remember going, okay, let me look into that for you because I'm not sure we can make anyone get a vaccination.
Yeah, and
I think
the important thing, Shelley, I think
continue to be an
too.
interesting conversation.
Yeah, the important thing to think about is there's the legal question and then there's the moral or cultural question. Can you, should
Right.
you? You know, that's what you really got to decide as an employer, as an organization. Yeah, we probably have the right to do it. Do we want to do it? And is it the
Yeah,
right
right.
thing for our corporate culture to do it?
Right.
So, right.
Thanks, Keith. Questions for Keith? It'd be interesting to watch.
Keith, what was the point you made? The moral question
right.
that you could.
Well,
but
it's my
you want-
pleasure to introduce everyone to my friend Evan. Did you hear that, Keith?
Evan's question?
Yeah, did you hear that?
Yeah, what I was saying was that you have the legal question, Evan, can you do it? And then you have the moral question of, is it the right thing to do for your organization? And does it fit with your culture to say you have to get a vaccination to come work here? Or does that kind of go against the culture you're trying to establish? And that's not
Right.
a illegal question. It's more about what's the right thing for you to do.
Got you. All right.
I-
thank you.
I saw something on an attorney was talking on one of the talk shows, and she was saying that in almost any case that they're saying you can strongly encourage and recommend your team and put sort of the reasons why you're encouraging it, but making it a requirement may not be the greatest idea. That was just her opinion.
Yeah, and nobody can really make that decision except for each organization and how it works for them. But from a purely legal perspective, you probably can require it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you, Keith.
All right. So everyone meet my friend Evan Marcus, an obvious lifelong learner. He asks lots of questions. He's an author and a coach and the co-founder of DillonMarcus. I had the pleasure of working with Evan and the other co-founder of DillonMarcus, Tara. I don't know, probably 8 or 9 years ago when I was a VP of HR and the CEO had hired them to help with sort of what I'll call creating a culture at that company and putting words around the culture and the core values. And then recently we had the pleasure of working on a mutual client this year. And through reconnecting, I learned, among other things, Evan will give this much more eloquent explanation, but Evan is, I think, a certified coach of this thing called the Spot It method, which we talked about in our advertising, which is an immediate way to be able to identify anxiety and how to stop the process of you having that anxiety. Evan's going to share her story of his own anxiety, the Spot It method. We're going to, I think, go through an example of the Spot It method together.
Yep.
And then not that this is the point of the session, but if you have any interest in bringing the Spot It method to your organization, Evan could talk a little bit about that too. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Evan.
Yeah, thanks, Shelley. And I'm looking at the picture. I wonder how much older I look than that picture there. But this is the last thing I ever thought I would be talking about or sharing about publicly. The career I've had over the last 25 years has been mostly about working with senior leader teams, coaching individuals, doing leadership programs. As Shelley said, often we've been brought in to help companies define and create the processes to create their culture. But all along this time, I'm now 60. I turned 60 in June, and I probably have had anxiety most of my life, when I look back on it. But where it really kicked in and grabbed my attention, I was living in San Francisco after I graduated college. I moved out there with my best friend. He still lives there. Got married, and I had a job in the afternoon. I didn't know what I want to do for a living at that point. So I ended up with a job working at DillonMarcus. My last name's Marcus. It was so funny. People would see the name on my name tag and they'd say things like, wow, it's so nice you're starting at the bottom. And I had this, my parents, I grew up, my parents had a couple businesses. My dad had been a pharmacist, and then about halfway through that 20 years of that, he and my mom opened up an interior decorating business out in Skip Pack. I don't know if you know where Skip Pack is. And so I was around furniture. I love furniture. I like working with wood. And I had this vision of myself becoming like a woodworker, repairing antiques and stuff. And I found the name of this place, Cow Hollow Woodworks in San Francisco in the Marina District. And I went down there and I told the guy what I wanted to do. And he said, well, I really don't need any craftsmen, but I need someone to help bring in the business to sell it. It's not really what I wanted to do, but basically I had a truck. I'd go out, he'd give me a name. I'd go look at the piece, tell him what I thought it cost and bring it back. And I was really good at it because I did have an idea of how long it took to repair something, even though I wasn't good at doing it. And he liked me. So I had these 2 jobs. I'm doing real well. And one day I'm driving in the truck to go pick up some supplies. I don't know if anybody knows that part of San Francisco. And I was listening to, I'll never forget it. I was listening to Van Morrison came on, Moon Dance, which I loved. And I'm in the truck and I'm, 23 years old, bouncing in my seat, singing the song. And out of the blue, I feel this thing like go through my arm and then into my chest. I'd never experienced anything like that. And I was in very good shape, and my mind, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, how this works. My mind automatically thought I'm dying and I'm having a heart attack. Or first I thought I was having a heart attack. I'm like, what is this? I think I'm dying. Next thing you know, I didn't know the city that well. You know those H signs, like where a hospital is? They actually work. I'm like following H signs, running red lights, getting to the hospital before I die. And I literally like pull into the emergency room. I jump out of the truck and go in and they hook me up. And it's kind of how I found out I was not having a heart attack. I was having a panic attack. And that just started a very difficult period of my life. It didn't end with that one panic attack. It just really triggered a lot of anxiety, fear in my life. I'd never experienced anything like that. I remember my best friend. It's just amazing how we'll change. So I'm 23. When I left Philly, a different friend who was very close to me, he had a tough childhood and he had started to see a therapist. And what I said to him, I still can't believe this is what came out of my mouth if you know me now. I said, why would you go to a therapist? That's for people who are weak. But when I had this panic attack and started having anxiety, man, I ran to a therapist like I just needed help. And how I got to this, for anyone, and we'll find out. I hope this people feel comfortable talking. We'll make this a conversation. I was very embarrassed by it. I really, anyone who's had any mental health issues, there really is a stigma about it. I was, whenever I told people they didn't judge me, but in my mind, I was so embarrassed to tell people. I didn't, and I was scared to. And jump ahead in my career, I'm coaching executives and working with senior leadership teams. I'm thinking I can't tell these people what I'm dealing with. Why would they want to work with me? If they knew, and that's kind of what led to where we are today. So the idea that I'm actually talking about it publicly is just surprising to me, but I'm grateful that I can. And I'm curious, before we hop into some of the slides, I'm just curious why this topic was of interest, and feel free, to not say anything, to type in the chat, whatever. I don't know, maybe it's an issue you have or someone in your family or people you work with, but I was just curious why people were interested.
Just as a reminder, you can take yourself off mute and feel free to chime in or put something in the chat and I'll monitor it.
Well, as I've been talking about on LinkedIn for a while, I think employee mental health has to be our top concern going into next year, and just worrying about mental well-being and the whole employee. So to me, it was very timely and something that everybody needs to hear.
Keith, I'm curious what gives you that perspective, like that you have that awareness of why it's so important.
I think just observation, working with employees, that I've been responsible for, personal experiences and feelings during all this.
Yeah.
Just seeing my peers and seeing how everybody's handling it.
Right.
and seeing that we don't seem to give enough attention to it, in my view.
Yeah.
I also feel like people's fuses have grown way shorter over the last 9 months. There's just very little personally speaking, I have little tolerance for like stuff on the surface that
Yeah.
don't really add value to me right now, right? Like for me, I feel like there's so few things to look forward to. Like I can't see my whole family for Christmas next week, just like the most of you. I didn't have
Yeah.
a Thanksgiving with my parents, which in my whole life, I've never not had Thanksgiving with my parents, right? You know,
Yeah.
a few weeks ago, I had to cancel my vacation, everything that we're all experiencing. And I just feel like I want to just do the things that bring me joy, because currently I feel like I don't have a whole lot of that sort of normal life joy, and fuses are just shorter. So for me, I think that contributes to, anxiety for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Shelley. I think everybody fuses are a bit short, even when we
Right.
think they're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
There were
All
two
right.
comments in the chat, Evan. It says, involvement in coaching and in this time of COVID need to help identify what's needed to help move ahead successfully.
Yeah.
And then another one said, I agree with Keith. Personally, I'm feeling very burnt out as 2020 comes to an end and would like to go into the new year with a clear head and share tips with colleagues who might be also feeling the same way.
Okay. Well, can I share my screen? You cannot share
I
screen.
think so. Let me see if I can do that. Or maybe Dylan needs to help with that if he's on. No. Okay. Let me just see.
I think if you go into
Dylan is not on.
Let me just give me 1 second.
whoever's the host, I think if you go in the share screen, it'll prompt you to say, let others share their screen.
Yeah, the host is not on. That's
Hold
the
on.
problem.
I can text him.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I can keep going. I don't need slides.
That's okay.
As I said, this is the last thing I ever thought I would be sharing about. So in my journey, and what I'm going to cover today is a little bit of my own story, a little bit talk about, the impact anxiety has on so many people. And there really is a continuum from stress and anxiety. I'm going to really what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you a tool that I've learned. I didn't develop it. It's been around since the 30s. So this isn't a promo. I'm going to actually teach you the tool. Like you'll understand how to use this for yourself, other people. And that's really the main thing I'm going to focus my time on. As Shelley said, I am on a mission. I know the more I started to open up about anxiety, two very interesting things happened. One, not only was I not told I don't want to work, people seem to respect me more, which was really blew my mind. I was like, that was the opposite of what I thought. And the second thing, which I really didn't expect, is people started opening up to me about their anxiety, people who work for them, maybe people in their family, their children. This is the honest truth. I have yet to share about this with someone and not have that experience. The first time I opened up about this, I had a meeting at Aramark. And part of my job is selling, I'm trying to meet senior leaders and sell our wares. And I was introduced to a senior leader at Aramark. He was one of the top people there. And his office was on the 30-something floor. And I don't have a big issue with elevators, but I just had not been high up on an elevator in years. I don't know why. I didn't avoid it. I just hadn't been. And I'm thinking about this meeting with him. I'm thinking, I'm going to be more focused on this freaking elevator than on my conversation with him, And something inside of me said, just tell him, because for those of us who have anxiety or stress, when you're hiding it, it just makes it worse. It exasperates it, And so I didn't do it for any moral or ethical. It was just pragmatic. It was like, well, if I tell him, it'll probably make it easier on me. So if anybody knows where the Aramark Tower used to be, the Reading Terminal's right there. So I emailed him. I said, hey, any chance we could meet down in the terminal? And all I said is something like, I have trouble with elevators, which for me was a big deal. And it's never a big deal for anybody else, but just in my own head, So he emails me back and he says, I'm having a busy day anyway. Why don't you just call me and we can do that? I said, fine. So I call him. He picks up the phone. I'm sitting there with the phone in my hand. And first thing he says to me, he says, oh, so you have trouble with tight spaces? Me too. And now he's one of the top 10 or 20 people at Aramark, a huge organization. And for 20 minutes, he starts telling me about his life journey dealing with anxiety. And the whole time I'm just shaking my head on the phone thinking, man, here I'm worried about this guy not wanting to deal with me. And here I have a buddy on this journey. And that story has repeated itself over and over and over again. And it gave me some confidence to start talking about it. But here, let me go to thank you, Dylan. Let me go to my slideshow. I like this slide. It's funny. Depending on your age, I guess we're all of the age we would know this slide. Anybody remember who this guy is? You get a prize if anybody remembers his name.
Oh God, he had a name?
Cy Sperling.
Cy Sperling, not just a client.
There you go.
I mean, not just the owner.
Cy Sperling started the Hair Club for Men. There's him without his hair. And he would come on the TV and he'd say, I'm not just the president, I'm a member of the club. And I share this with you because, dang, we got started already, because I like people to know this isn't just something like a neat project I took on. This has been my journey. About 20 years ago, and I went to therapy. I tried all kinds of things, you know, and sometimes were better than others. I had times in my life, I mean, there was a point I had trouble leaving my apartment. It was so bad, you know. And I found my wife and I were about to get married. We moved to Morristown, New Jersey. And it was right around this time of year. They put out the calendar for the town. There was a little ad in the back of the calendar. It said, Recovery International, self-help group for people with anxiety and depression. I'm like, oh, okay. And I call this phone number. This gentleman, his name was John Durkin. He just passed away. He was 92. And he told me about this support group, peers. Just, it was no professional. It was just people who dealt with anxiety, depression. And he said, why don't you come? I went, and it made sense to me right away what they were doing. What we were practicing was a method that was developed in 1930s by a psychiatrist named Dr. Abraham Lowe. He had trained with Jung and Freud in Europe. He came here. He was working in the state hospital system in Illinois. He saw so much recidivism, people in and out of hospitals. He saw the stigma, and he kind of was asking himself, how can I be more helpful? You know, back then, a traditional psychoanalyst, you'd see people 4 or 5 times a week. So how many people could he help, you know? And he doesn't get a lot of credit for this. Dr. Aaron Beck does at Penn, but Dr. Abraham Lowe is really the founder of cognitive behavioral therapy. And he starts this group. What he did at first, he develops this concept, this very simple technique. I'm going to teach you. And he said, don't confuse the simplicity with the power of this thing. He needed it to be something simple that regular people could use and it would be highly effective. And he took 30 patients of his that had been in and out of hospitals most of their adult life, and he teaches them this method, and not one of them ever went back to the hospital. And that kind of gave him the confidence to start teaching it to, I don't mean to say regular people, but his clients that were not hospitalized, people dealing with the everyday stresses, fears, anxieties of life. And this group grew, this Recovery International group grew. There are meetings you could go to. There's actually, I don't know if there's one in Bryn Mawr. I think there's one out there. There's a couple in Philly. We have a whole bunch in South Jersey. They're free. I mean, you put a couple bucks in the hat, you know, it's not a 12-step meeting, but it's similar in the sense of its peers. There's meetings all over the United States, Canada, India, South America, England, Ireland. The organization grew, and then it just has kind of been wilting the last number of years. And it was really my partner, my wife, Tara. I mean, I started going to these meetings. I've gone for 20 years, and it has helped me more than any other thing in my life. It's very simple and pragmatic. It's situational. It's not like you conquer your anxiety, but you start to learn how to deal with situations. And I'm going to teach you the method that we learn. That's what we do in our meetings. We practice the method. It's not like Vicky saying, hey, Evan, you know, it's not like a therapy group. You'll see, it's very simple. The method takes like 3 or 4 minutes to use. And it was Tara, my wife and my business partner. She's the Dillon of DillonMarcus, the president of our company. I'm the vice president. She's the president. We are a woman-owned business. And as I opened up more and we saw more of the anxiety and it was coming out more on the news, I saw it It's funny, I wrote my master's thesis on mental preparation in elite athletes. I did a case study of baseball pitchers, professional baseball pitchers. You'd think I'd know more about anxiety. I mean, I did, I learned a lot. But there was something about hearing my clients, seeing it in the news, and what really triggered me for some odd reason, I read ESPN a lot. I like basketball. And there was an article about Kevin Love, who's a basketball player for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And he had opened up about in the middle of one game, he was like rolling around on the floor in the locker room thinking he's dying, like me. He was having a panic attack. He started opening up about his mental health issues. Their coach, Tyrone Lue, ended up taking 2 weeks or 2 months off to deal with his anxiety. More basketball players started to open up. And something about that just kind of gave me the push to go, you got to tell people about this method because it's so simple. It can help people. And I know what it's like to struggle. And it's not just for people like me who have more stronger anxieties. I'm going to share with you, like my wife doesn't experience that, but she's dealing with the normal stresses of life. We'll go in examples, that can trigger any of us. And this simple method will just help you, be more effective with it. So let me go ahead and teach the method. I'm just curious as people listening to this, do you like, I always wonder, do I go with the slide about San Francisco? Because I tell my story of San Francisco. Do people like Cy Sperling better as an opening slide? So as my fellow HR people, if you don't mind putting in the chat, which slide do you think is a better slide to open up with? But here, I'm going to show you the method very simply. Then I'm going to teach you some underlying concepts. And please feel free to, share this with your family, with anyone you know, because it can help people. I've helped athletes with this. So in the middle of the game, they start getting, worked up to, people who get an email from your client that they're upset because they didn't get something you promised and people are worked up to a criticism from somebody, being pissed off at someone who's late, someone flipping you the bird in your car. I mean, all the things that trigger us, worries about money, worries about COVID, all of it, the same method works. And the method is simple. It takes, again, 3 or 4 minutes. You can do it on your own. You can write it down on a piece of paper in your own mind. Once you learn it, you can do it with other people. And I'm going to share with how that works. You can do it in a group setting. So the 4 steps are simple. It's identifying the situation. And again, I'll go in more detail in a little bit. The second step is identifying the symptoms you're having, both the physical and the mental symptoms. The third section is really the gold. That's why it's called Spot It. These are these phrases we learn, because what Dr. Lowe understood is when you're having these feelings, and this could range from headaches to depression to anxiety to, it's a myriad of symptoms. What he figured out was it's the thinking, the thoughts that triggered the symptom. And often the thoughts are so quick and so habitual, we don't even hear them. We just feel our reaction. But like my story, and again, I'll go in more detail when I told you about in the car, that in the truck that day, what really triggered me was not the sensation I had. It was thinking I'm having a heart attack. I'm dying. As soon as my thoughts went there, as soon as and I'm going to teach you more about this, but it's the thoughts. And so what the method teaches, how to replace those negative thoughts with positive thoughts. And again, I'll go in more detail. And the fourth step is identifying your success, how you're growing through this. Each one of these steps is like a choreography. They weave in and out, and one builds on the other. I like to bake bread, and I grew up. Both my grandfathers were bread bakers in South Philly, and anyone who's baked or, there's a sequence. You put the dry ingredients in, and then you add the wet ingredients, and then you knead it. It has to like each step matters, and the same thing. These 4 are a beautiful choreography. One builds on the other. And the whole process is what starts to work you down when you're feeling stress and anxiety. Before I go on, I'm just curious and feel no pressure. I'd like to play the game that what anybody shares here will stay here in the meeting. It's not like we're going to share deep, dark secrets, but I find it's important to have for us to have openness that if someone shares something personal, it stays here. It doesn't go beyond. We don't share this with someone else. But I'm just curious if anybody, if there's any particular issues anyone has that, triggers your anxiety, any particular situations. or someone in your family or someone who works with you or for you. And again, feel no pressure if you don't want to share any of that.
Evan, what about, I think someone mentioned it earlier. What about, or maybe you did, you sort of see that email come in from that person who just
Yeah.
is a trigger. Like before you
Yeah.
even open the email, you're already pissed off
Yeah,
or agitated.
absolutely. Is that one that triggers you sometimes, Shell?
Indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, my alarm's going off. Sorry. Anybody else have, I certainly know that one. Sometimes you just see the person's name, you're like, oh,
Somebody just put in chat, how about when there has to be a confrontation? I'm assuming that means like
yeah,
a difficult conversation.
absolutely. Absolutely. We'll explore all these examples. Travel is one for me. I've had times when I was flying and traveling everywhere, and other times where I've had trouble traveling. And so, all right, let's keep going. Before I get into the depth of the method, there's some underlying concepts that I find even of their own, are very helpful to you, and they'll help make the process make more sense to you. And I'll go through, I don't know, there's 6 I picked. I may not go through all of them. This one is really critical. You can read it. I don't have to read it to you. This is such an important part of this process. I know for me, I always thought that it was these situations that were causing me the stress, the anxiety, the symptoms I was getting. And family things, it could have been my relationship with my mother, friend things, it could be what someone said, it could be COVID, all external things. I always thought it was stuff out there. So, and I think like a lot of people, we think, well, if I could just manage everybody or everything, then I'd get my peace of mind. But what Dr. Lowe and what the method teaches is it's not the situation, it's our reaction to it. This is such an important part of this, because what the method is going to do, it's going to help you identify this. And like people would say to me things like, well, they could said something like this, and I'd say, great, okay, it's not me, it's not the situation, it's me. What do I do? Or they'd say, well, can't you just relax? Yeah, I would if I could, like, but what I love about this, it's gonna be like, oh, don't just make bread. This is step 1, this is step 2. It's going to show you how to do it. But this is a really important concept to get, and especially the person who's a coach, you'll know this is so important, a concept to teach people in coaching, because everybody thinks it's out there. If I could just manage everything and everything out there. A second concept, and this will even make more sense as we go through it, because the method teaches you how to react in situations. Often in the moment, there's this feeling like, I got to tell this person off. I have to straighten out this person. I have to blah, blah, blah. But when you start to learn here that the key to this whole thing is that our peace of mind, our mental fitness is what's most important. And even from the work I did in my master's thesis and much of the work I've done studying and spirituality and meditation, is the truth is when we're more at peace and calm, we're our most effective anyway at dealing with the situation. But you're going to see, this will make a little more sense later on about why this principle is so important. I'll go a couple more. And if anybody has any questions about any of these or a comment, just raise your hand or shout, however you want to. Does anybody want to comment on either of those 2 so far? I'm so good at this, there's nothing else to say, The third concept goes back to the first one. Again, this is so, and Dr. Lowe would say, it's so simple. Don't let that get in the way of why it's so powerful. So think about the first concept I taught you, that it's not the situation or its reaction to it. And I told you about the essence of cognitive behavioral therapy. It's our thoughts that are triggering these emotional reactions we have. So if a negative thought, it's such a simple concept. If it's a negative thought that caused the problem, not the email from someone, or not the sensation I had driving my truck, it's my thinking that caused the problem, it's the same process that's the solution. And you know this in life. I mean, so often, like the lack of strategy is the problem. The solution is have a good strategy, The problem is having a poor culture. What's the solution? Have a good culture. You know, the solution and the problem are right next to each other. Same thing here. It's so simple. It just blew me away as I started to understand it. Man, it's my thinking that's causing this problem, but it's my thinking that can change it. And this last one I want to show you, and I actually have a prop, a dimmer switch, you know, for your lights. Who doesn't have a dimmer switch in their house? I did not understand this, that within me is a mechanism. There's a dimmer switch. And in any situation, my thoughts, my beliefs, my reactions to it, even my physical reactions, are doing one of two things. Either turning the dimmer switch up on stress or turning it down to its more, I am having more peace or calm. Every reaction I have, and this was a big deal to realize, because I thought, what's the big deal? It's just a thought, right? It's like a grain of sand, each thought. But little did I know that each thought builds, and it's doing one of two things. And we know this, you know this in your HR world. We talk about it relationships all the time. Either you're depositing into a relationship or withdrawing from a relationship, right? Everything we do is either building a better relationship or breaking it. That's why we always say you have to build up those deposits, because inevitably something's going to happen to create some friction. If you have a lot of positive deposits, then it's not so negative. Same thing with this. Every thought, and I'm going to teach you more about how to do this. You're either creating a greater sense of security in yourself, or you're creating more tenseness. And we're the ones doing it. And what's the good and bad news of this? The good news for me was, wow, I used to feel like this was just happening to me. I had no idea that I was the one doing it to myself. And that's a hell of a thing to realize. You're doing it to yourself. The good news is, well, then you have some control. The bad news is now you can't blame other people. So it's the good and the bad. But I love, if you get nothing out of it, if you got to leave now, go. If you know nothing more than this idea of this dimmer switch, it'll help you so much. So again, let's go into the method itself, all right? And I'm going to actually show it to you, and we're going to practice it. We'll have at least a chance to do one example, and I'll either do the example, I'll make one up, or if someone wants, it's actually better if someone's willing to take a little bit of a risk and give us an example. And I remember my first day in graduate school that it was very experiential, and no one was doing anything. We're just sitting there listening, and the professor goes, your experience in these next 2 years are going to be based on the extent you want to put yourself out there. He goes, I'm happy to talk, but you'll get more out of it, you know, and the same thing with this here. So I'm going to teach you one more concept. And again, if this stuff is gold, and I knew nothing about this until I learned it. What really triggers our symptoms is temper. And it goes like this. Basically, you have this natural system. Temper creates a tenseness in our biological and psychological in our system. When we have this tenseness, that's what triggers our symptoms. Now, again, it happens so fast. All I know is I feel tightness in my throat. I'm feeling pissed off. My hands are sweaty. But what I didn't realize was something triggered that. And it's this thing, it's temper. And he made it so simple. He defined temper two ways, very simple, either angry temper or fearful temper. It's always one of these two that trigger us off. And angry temper, as you can see here, is any time you judge another person is not good enough or wrong, you just created temper in yourself. The person sends that email. And this is so simple, but so hard. Someone writes me an email and it's rude. I'm pissed off now, right? But you see this bottom line, we drop our temper, we realize we're its casualty. As soon as I start getting pissed off at that person, who's hurting? Me. As soon as I judge them as wrong, that's why I go back. Remember I said peace of mind's our primary goal? If peace of mind's my primary goal, I got to drop my temper. Not because the person was wrong for what they said, and we're going to get into that, like how you handle these situations, but I don't want to be upset. That's why I'm dropping my temper, not because the person was right or wrong. but because I don't want to get upset. Fear is the same thing, but reverse. It's pointing inwardly. I'm not good enough. Any form of thought of I'm not good enough, I'm wrong. For me, the fearful temper is more prevalent. For some people, angry temper is more prevalent. It just depends on your personality. You know, I have a lot of those. I just was raised in a family with a lot of self-doubt. You know, it's in our genes. And so, but any form of what you feel is worry, embarrassment, shame, it's so simple to core. It's identifying I'm wrong. I didn't do something good enough in a situation. And this bridge is what's so important. So the person who sent me that email that was rude, how did it get inside of me? Like, it was just an email. How am I now upset? Temper. Temper is the bridge that connects the outer world, everything outside your skin, into your body. So when you're feeling upset by COVID or worried about money or what someone said to you or someone being late, the only way that issue got inside your body is because you had one of these tempers. And when I learned this, it's so simple. It's not easy. That's what, Dr. Lowe would say, I could teach you this in 10 minutes. It's not always easy to practice like any other skill. I know Shelley was a really good baseball pitcher. She could probably explain to me how to throw a softball fast, but doesn't mean I could do it. But by practice, eventually I could do it, So before I go into the method, again, just any comments or thoughts, any experience you've had with any of this that go, wow, that makes sense to me, or I don't get it, or anything you'd want me to go over before we move on. As much as I love Zoom, it's such a different, I'm so used to being in front of people, my whole career coaching and Zoom is just so different of not being able to move around, but anything. Okay, I will keep going. I'm going to jump to step 3, and then I'm going to go back to step 1, 2, and 4, because step 3 is the gold. I've taught this method to people. They don't even practice the whole method. They just use these phrases. Now, remember what I told you? If these are insecure and negative thoughts is what trigger the temper and the fear and the anger and all these symptoms. So what Dr. Lowe, the method taught was how to replace when you identify in the process, you start to identify those insecure, angry, fearful thoughts, you have to replace them with new thoughts. And he wrote about 200 of these things. These are just 5 or 6 I want to introduce you to because they're very good ones. I know most of them by heart, not because I ever tried to memorize them, but when we teach the method, you start to learn these, you practice them. And the image I like to use, they're like a toolkit. Like a carpenter has, here's a screwdriver. It's a very common tool, but I can't use it for a hammer. Like if I'm taking out a screw, I pull out the screwdriver. When you start to learn these phrases, you start to learn certain phrases are like a screwdriver. They fit certain situations. I have another tool. This is a little square. This has a certain purpose. These phrases fit certain purpose. This is if I want to draw a square line, I can use this, I have a little block plane. This gets a little more sophisticated. And then the same thing with these phrases, as you learn them and you get better at them, just like a master carpenter. My brother-in-law was a plumber, man. He was great with tools, way better than me. I knew how to use things, but he could do them. And as you practice them, you get better at it. That's why I've been doing this for 20 years. I still go to meetings. I still practice this on a daily basis. And here comes my cat. And in my mind, here's a thought right away. The cat comes, I'm like, oh, what are these people going to think? I'm being unprofessional. The thoughts come so quickly. But let me go over some of these. They're very self-explanatory, but I'll explain how you use them. So calm brings calm this is like the screwdriver. This is the core spot, I think. When you find yourself being worked up, you change the thought. So you find yourself worked up, you start telling yourself over and over again, calm brings calm. Calm brings calm. Calm brings calm. You literally just like the fearful thought, oh no, what are they going to think about? I'm not professional. I have a cat walking around. As that starts to work me up, remember the dimmer switch? Every thought's going to have some impact, one or the other. So if, oh no, what are they going to think about me? He's going to turn the dimmer switch up. When you use a phrase like calm brings calm, what do you think it's going to do? It turns the dimmer, it starts creating more security and peace. But it's not just the phrase. If you remember the slide, it's not just our words, it's our bodily reactions. And we all do this. Someone ticks us off and I'm like, Shelly, can you believe what happened? Blah, 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 blah. As soon as you start doing that, if your body, you're now working yourself up. You're putting fuel on the fire. So calm brings calm. When you notice, you slow down your voice, because most of us, when we're angry or fearful, we'll start talking faster. Your tone, maybe, can you believe, you start lowering your tone. Maybe you're the kind of person who bounces your leg a lot when you're nervous. You start to stop that. You start to literally change your body, because your body will now tell your mind, oh, everything's okay. When you're bouncing your leg, you're getting all upset. Again, what are you doing? You're turning the dimmer switch up. We have to constantly think about, what could I do now to turn the dimmer switch down? Now, some people say, sometimes you have to speak up for your, absolutely. But we learn how to, like the person who said about the difficult conversations. There's a phrase, we call them spots, they're phrases. There's one that goes like this: you can say anything in a cultured manner. What that means is, rather than me going to someone and say, I am so pissed off at you, you start that speaking temper, it works me up. But when I say to someone, Chris, when you said that, it upset me. When you were late for the meeting, I felt like you didn't respect my time. When you learn to speak in calm manners, you're still learning how to communicate. What we love about this, especially in the workplace, this method will shoot your people's emotional intelligence way up. It just, all of a sudden, rather than yelling at someone, I'm saying, and we work with people like union carpenters. They curse at each other all day long. It's not wrong. But if peace of mind is important to you, you got to stop doing that. And then you can say to someone, that was not safe. That was not acceptable. We have to figure out a better way to do it. So this isn't about not communicating, but it's learning how to communicate in an emotionally intelligent way for the sake of our mental health, not because we're goody two shoes or about ethics or morality. It's very pragmatic. I'm not going to go through all these, but I want to go.
And I just wanted to say, from a time check perspective, if people have to drop off, we only have about 10 minutes until 5 o'clock.
Yeah. So let me go into let me do one more, and you can see these, but let me go into the method itself so you can see. And by the way, if anyone wants to stay on longer, I'll stay as long as anybody wants. And if you want to practice this, I'll do it. Here's the method itself. And it literally takes 4 minutes to do. Does anybody have a situation? If not, I will give an example. Some situation that triggered you, gave you symptoms, anxiety, frustration. All right, I'm going to give an example of, I did this webinar a couple weeks ago and a guy just started laughing. So he owns properties. And right before our call, he went to a tenant who had a water leak. And he brought the plumber. He told the tenant, I'm coming. He gets there and the tenant won't let him in. And he started getting, so when you give the situation, you don't start going into you break it into chunks. Step one, what's the situation? I think his name was John. So rather than going into the whole story, what happened, John, give me the situation briefly. I went to the guy's house. I had the plumber. He wouldn't let me in. Boom, you stop right there. Again, you can write this down or say in your head. Step two, what are the symptoms? What I like about this, it's the difference about being a smoothie in your blender, being all blah, and going, oh, there's the banana, there's the strawberries, there's the ice. Oh, it'll be a margarita in a minute, but it's in separate pieces, Step two, what are your symptoms? So for him, the symptoms were tightness in his throat. Everybody has different symptoms. His head felt like it was throbbing. He felt this rush of energy. Thought symptoms. I'm going to kick this guy's butt. What's going to happen to my apartment? I can't believe this is happening. I got to get the cops. This is going to turn physical. Those are the thought symptoms. Boom. Third step. This is where you replace all that with these spots. He could look at this and you just go through. We give people a list. You look at the list. All right. Calm brings calm. My imagination's on fire. He's thinking about all the next 10 steps that are going to happen. We can do anything in symptoms. Don't make an emergency out of it. It actually wasn't an emergency, but so you use these spots. They start to work us down. The second part of step 3 is the sigh of endorsements. Remember, it's the symptoms, it's the fear that works us up. What works us down? Security. When you start giving yourself a pat on the back and acknowledging the good that you're doing, it's a really important step that where many of us are not used to, but it creates more security. So he could say, all right, you do this in your head. I endorse myself. I didn't yell at the guy. Endorse myself. I showed up. Endorse myself. I brought a plumber. All the positive things you do. Again, it may seem like it's benign. I feel like a child doing that, but each one of those is like a deposit of security in yourself. And the more you practice this, the more you get better at it. And step 4 is noting your progress. Wow, before I would have yelled at the person. I would have done this, I would have done that. And the more you practice and the more you acknowledge your progress, again, each one of these is like a step in the process. And this very simple process that we learn starts to work us down. And I'll end with this. You can do this on your own. When we teach it to people, you can do it like if Vicky knew it. You call each other. People call me every day and I call them. I could call Vicky. Hey, Vicky, do you have 5 minutes to do a spot? Sure, Evan, happy to help you. And Vicky would walk me through these 4 steps. I'll end. I was once in New York City. I had taken the kids. We were in the Lower East Side. I was by myself with them. I get in the city and I feel like I'm having a panic attack. That is not a good place to have one with your kids in New York City. It's not like I can get out of there quickly. What do? I pick up my cell phone. I call a guy named Aaron who knows this method. I go, he knows why I'm calling. He walks me through these steps, just like I did here. And 4 minutes later, this has happened to me hundreds, thousands of times. 4 minutes later, it's like the switch is turned off. And now I am there with my kids having a good time. I've been leading retreats and I step out to go to the bathroom. I'm like, I call someone, I'm leading a retreat. 4 minutes later, I'm back in the room. No one knows I'm doing my thing. It's so effective and helpful. So again, I'm happy to stay on as long as anybody wants to learn more or talk more or give an example. So.
Anyone have a situation they want to run through? Whether it's maybe a coworker that you're working with or anything personal? It does seem quite simple, I have to say. So I'd love to hear, another example or two to help us exercise those muscles.
I use it with my children. We use it in work situations.
I know a lot of people on this call, you're not that shy.
And by the way, Shelly will send out my phone number, email. If anyone feels more comfortable, you'd rather talk offline, I'm happy to help you with this. Talk about it anymore if anybody wants more information. What can be helpful for us, we're trying to get this out into our focuses in the workplace. We've been talking to universities, we've been talking to schools, we've been talking to workplaces. We're able to offer it as a wellness benefit on people's, just like a smoking cessation plan. We're able to certify people to trainers to do it. We have a really wonderful online course. And what I'd like to do is if you're interested, all I need is your email. I will give you for free the online course that we developed. You'll see how it works. I teach the whole method, with another person. It's a really helpful tool and I'm happy to share it with your community. And you just email me and let me know if you want it, and I'll give you access to the course.
Evan, do you want to just give your email address real quick while we're on the line?
Yeah, it's I can put it in the chat, but it's simple. It's evan@DillonMarcus.com. I hope it was helpful to people. My main hope is to give you some tools, some concepts that you can use, for yourself or people in your life. I'm also, over COVID, what we asked ourselves was, how can we be helpful? I've done this webinar about 50 times. If any of your organizations or people there's not a sales call. I just want to, I've done these for free and I'll continue to. If you have an organization, I've done it for many companies. I'm happy to do it. Just let me know. We'll schedule an hour and a quarter, and I can teach it to you. and people have found it very helpful. So I'm happy to do that.
Elizabeth just made a note. Elizabeth, did you get Evan's email address? She's interested in talking to Evan. So Elizabeth, if
Here,
you have Evan's email address.
I'll type it in the chat.
Yeah, thank you.
Let me stop sharing, then I can type it in the chat. Sorry, everybody.
Thank you.
But again, if anyone wants to stay on, I'm happy to.
Some
by
really
the
nice
way, again,
comments coming in. Thanks, everybody. This was great.
I did not develop this method. Dr. Abraham Lowe did. What we did is we reached out to the nonprofit called Recovery Inc. and we licensed from them the rights to develop a course around this specifically for the workplace. We have the exclusive rights in the world to do this.
Mhm.
And as much as I love my coaching and the other work, there's a mission here for me because it's so personal. I mean, I know what it's like, and I see how it helps so many people. Kids, we're looking at. I was talking to a colleague of mine was a superintendent in the Philadelphia school district. And we're looking at like adjudicated youth who, they just. We're talking to people in Germantown. That so many of the problems people have is how reactive they are. And this helps people slow that down so people can be more proactive in how they react to situations. I was talking to a woman who runs she's the head of HR of a sizable grocery store chain. They're not supermarket, grocery store. How old am I? And she's pointed over to one of their counters. It's not Wegmans, but it's like Wegmans. And she said, we lost our best employee because a customer complained about her, like rudely. And she said, I'm going to go tell HR, the manager about you. And it triggered this woman. And she followed the customer because she was so upset what the customer was doing to her. And they had to fire. They had to let her go. And I'm telling you, if she would have known this method, she would have stopped. She would have known how to stop herself in the moment,
Yeah. I thought what you said a few minutes ago earlier about increasing the emotional intelligence was really interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but I think anytime you can have someone made a comment earlier about a confrontation, right? I think most people think when it's a negative, when there's disagreement, it's confrontation. I don't always think that's a bad thing, by the way. I think disagreeing is sometimes good, and through disagreement, we get the best ideas. But I never thought about the aspect of being able to have a disagreement or a heated conversation, if you will, in a calm way really increases emotional intelligence. I think that's interesting.
I think it's funny because, we're out there teaching about emotional intelligence. You know what I mean? But it's like that thing, Evan, can you relax? Yeah, how?
Yeah.
Same thing with this. It puts the rubber on the road. It makes people more emotionally intelligent. When you do this, how you handle your own emotions and how you communicate skyrockets.
Yeah. And
how much crap happens in companies because how people took a look. You gave someone a look, and now they're mad. They're not going to talk to you for a month.
I will share a funny story. And Michelle, thanks for the nice comment. This summer I was talking to Evan. We were talking about something, and an email came in from someone, and I was like, oh. And he said, "What is it?" And I told him, and he said, "Just say no, thank you." This person was, in my opinion, wanting to get in my business, and I didn't want her in it. And he said, "Just write back, no, thank you." And I was like, "Oh." He's like, don't engage, just don't engage, just write no thank you, I got it. And then she wrote back, okay, great. And he was like, see, you got all worked up for nothing. And I just, and sometimes I think maybe because this person maybe still is a trigger for me. You're right, how I manage my reaction to her. I used to think it was, I have to manage her differently than like how I'd email you or how I'd email Keith, when in fact, that's not it at all. It's my reaction to her is what's causing me to feel like she needs to get in my business when she probably was just trying to be helpful. And I'm like, no, thank you.
And it also helps. We react when we need to have those conversations. You just react in such a more positive, effective way. You're not so reactional. And just think about the amount of energy that's sucked up in the workplace because people are caught up in, I'm sure you guys know, I never heard this term before, but you know it. I had never heard the term presenteeism. I knew about absenteeism, but this whole idea that people are going to work, they're in anxious, stressful, pissed off symptoms. Not only do they drain their own energy, they're draining the energy of the people around them.
Yeah.
There's a lot, there's been research about how the impact of presenteeism on people. So.
Yeah. Thanks, Freddie Joe. Good point. Thank you.
And if anybody has any thoughts, just to help us get this message out there, I would appreciate any, if you have any suggestions of people we should be talking to, or that would, someone had a question here about therapists. I wish my therapist, when I was in therapy years ago, would have known about this. And we're looking at how do we train therapists. It's amazing how few people know about this method. I find for myself as a coach, I don't teach everyone this method. It fits some people I coach more than others, but it makes my coaching so much more effective because when they call, we now handle this in 4 minutes rather than a half an hour.
Yeah.
And they learn tangible tools about, and in our coaching, we can see how they're progressing. Look, you didn't handle, look how much better you handled it. Oop, there you go again. It's such a valuable tool for coaches. I'm looking into being able to certify coaches in this method. We're even looking into people who use personal trainers. I've been talking to some trainers about this because they say to me, we're like the barber. Like people tell us everything.
Yep.
And I think this model of mental fitness versus mental health, and if you talk to any good trainer, they'll tell you their mental fitness is important or more important than the physical fitness. So if we can help people see this as a tool to cultivate their mental fitness and not see it as a stigma of mental health issues, it's just like, I don't know, anybody who has a trainer. I mean, you train, you don't, if you stop going to your trainer, it's not like you're going to stay in shape, you lose it, it's something. So I'm really excited about connecting with the fitness community, because I think this could be a great tool for trainers to use with their clients.
Yeah. Well, clearly you have passion around it, Evan. This has been really great. I don't want to cut anyone off unless they have anything else to say.
And again, I'll stay on. I mean, I'm happy to just.
I don't want to close the hour without, maybe Vicki and Keith and I just saying, as we close out the year for 2020 and HR at Home, it's really been great to stay connected with you all. We I don't want to speak for you guys, but we certainly hope you find value. I mean, we set out to just say, how can we stay connected as a community and share best practices and have an opportunity to still see each other and network. So thanks for continuing to be a part of it and be interested. And we're always open to hear any other thoughts or ideas that you have. So thank you for that. And I'll let Vicki and Keith say anything.
I was just going to say, my hope is that in 2021, I'll actually get to see everybody in person, not in this virtual, because I'm really kind of nothing against, I think this is wonderful, but I'm ready for something different.
Amen.
Yeah, and I think like Shelley said in the beginning when we started this, and we thought maybe there'd be 3 or 4 of these. I had no idea we'd be 16 of them later. So,
God help us.
but it's been a way to keep some sanity and stay in touch with the community. So if any of you have gotten value out of it along the way, even just spending an hour with each other every week or two, it's been good for that. And like Vicki said, I hope we get to all see each other in person next year.
Yeah, and for a time that's been so stressful, very apropos to this, it's given me some comfort to know I can see my friends Wednesdays at 4 o'clock. It's been really, really great. So,
yeah.
And especially for me, I'm an extreme extrovert, and being home has been very difficult, like many of you. And so I just appreciate being able to see some friends on Wednesdays at 4 o'clock. So it's been a good bit of therapy for me, for sure. Evan, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you
you.
so much.
Thanks, Evan.
Nice to meet you all.
You too.
Everybody have a great holiday season.
Happy holidays, everyone. We'll see you next year.
God bless you. Bye-bye.